Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Huddle, where we are going to dedicate this entire show today to one topic, and that is the most consequential decision Donald Trump has taken in his entire presidency: the war with Iran. The Ayatollah Khamenei is dead. A bunch of top Iranian leaders are also dead, dozens of them. But so too this morning, we have 5 U.S. service members who have also lost their lives. Just got news, 20 minutes ago, guys, that a fourth service member has died, and the president has warned that this is not going to be the last. This conflict right now is really ballooning, with Iran retaliating on a host of neighbors in other countries in the Middle East. Overnight, we heard that the militant group Hezbollah is joining the war by firing rockets at Israel. This morning, we're hearing that Kuwait air defenses mistakenly shot down 3 U.S. fighter jets, though those crews apparently ejected safely. There was the mass deadly shooting in Austin over the weekend, potentially inspired and motivated by the Iranian situation. This sort of underscores the vulnerabilities we now have here on the home front as this is carried out. So many unanswered questions swirling. What is the end game here? How long will it last? And the public, we should be clear here, is skeptical. The president has a case to make right now. So we're going to break all that down, Sean, Dan, and myself. And at the end of the show, we're actually going to have a special guest, Captain Morgan Murphy, a former Pentagon spokesman in Trump 1. So we're excited that he's going to be joining us, and we'll dig in with him as well. Guys, just before we jump in, working weekend, to say the least. I'm sure you were glued to your televisions as much as I was.
A remarkable time in history. And what's amazing is it was January 2nd. We went into Venezuela, and it was almost March, February 28th, March 1st, we went into Iran. I did not think that's how this year would start, but here we are.
How is May going to begin on a Saturday afternoon? Okay, let's go through the daybook really quick because we have a ton to get to. The Texas and North Carolina primaries are tomorrow. We will be obviously talking a lot about that tomorrow, not today, but you've heard us discuss a lot of this before. 8 a.m., we just heard from Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. I was taking some notes here, so we'll go through that as well. And General Kane briefing the media for the first time, hearing from the administration publicly. Really interesting that they actually haven't been out there messaging this as much. And I want to talk to Sean in particular about that. 11 o'clock, the president's going to be participating in a Medal of Honor ceremony. 1:30, he has signing time. 2 o'clock, policy meeting. 4 o'clock, policy meeting. 4 o'clock as well on Capitol Hill. Secretary Rubio and CIA Director Ratcliffe will brief Congress's Gang of 8 on Iran. The rest of the Hill, the rest of the lawmakers and rank and file, they will get briefed tomorrow. So we should also hear some news coming out of that. Just a quick note, do me a favor right now, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can look it up at the DC Huddle. And if you've already done that, send a link to this discussion to somebody you know who has questions about what's going on in Iran. Everybody's talking about it. Country, they want to know what's going on, and we would love for you to share this discussion with other people. Get our show in front of more people. Really helps us grow our audience. Let's do a quick word from our sponsor, Sean, Cozy Earth.
Yeah, well, thank them for everything they've done. Obviously, this is the weekend we come off this, and it's pretty amazing how many times I literally found myself jumping in and out of my Cozy Earth pajamas and joggers and sweats all weekend long from event to event to event. So I said it during the week, and I'll say it's just as true during the weekend, that it's amazing how many times I find myself slipping in or jumping out of one Cozy Earth outfit to go into another. And that's the beautiful thing about it, is from morning till night.
Uh-oh. Well, Sean froze. I'll just finish that. If you're watching, if you're watching a war on,
I was going to say
Cozy Earth. Yeah, there you go. Sorry, Sean, we lost you.
We'll use our code Huddle, 20% off anything site-wide, cozyearth.com. And like I said, I've told you guys this before, but if you're ever looking for a gift, I'm not kidding. My wife and I have matching Cozy Earth pajamas. And this morning is that mine or last night rather, as we're getting ready, and had to go look at the labels because that's how much Cozy Earth we have in our household. So go to cozyearth.com, use code Huddle.
Thanks to Cozy Earth. Okay, so I want to get to Hegseth in a second. But first, I want to talk about the why. Why is this happening now situation? Because We were in the middle of talks with Iran. There was talk about a potential deal on nuclear weapons. They were supposed to meet, the administration was supposed to meet next week, I believe, with Iranian officials. And yet sort of here we are. Sean, why is this happening right now?
Well, everything that I've learned over the weekend is that Iran totally misread the situation. They literally thought that if they offered enough that they'd buy a deal with Trump. And I think he has felt emboldened post Iran 1 and post Maduro. And as much as I think Witkoff and Kushner et al. Tried to get something, these guys literally felt that if they just threw some chum in the water, they'd get a deal and buy some time. And I think Trump just felt like, sorry, you're playing, you don't understand the stakes. These guys misread the situation from everything that I understand. And I think Trump just said he had enough, and that was it, plain and simple.
So there's been some conflicting reports out there about at least one aspect of the why now question, because over the weekend, the administration, they briefed reporters and said that Iran was considering a preeminent attack on the U.S. There has been reporting since then indicating that that is not the case, and that DOD told congressional staff on Sunday that Iran wasn't planning to attack the U.S. unless Israel attacked them. So I guess maybe that's where they get the preeminent attack thing.
But also remember, I mean, one of the things, and this is like semantics, but because I love there was a Democrat on this morning that said, there's a difference between potential danger and real danger. And that's just not how this works. I mean, if you have an opportunity to take out an enemy, they're at a weak point. The Ayatollah, I mean, look at the strike, broad daylight, right? The Ayatollah felt safe at night, traveling around on underground bunkers. They went broad daylight on this. They had clear intel to take them out. You take out X threats when you can. Sure. I mean, one of the things about bin Laden, if you go back and look, we had several opportunities to take him out. Some leaders chose not to act on that. I think the president realized we have a historic opportunity to take this guy out. We don't know when we're going to get it again, and we're going to do it.
So, Dan, that's a good segue to you, because I guess I'm surprised we haven't heard the administration make that case more publicly. The opportunity here, right? There was political unrest with the protests. Iran has economic problems right now. They have the intel. And so if you don't do it now, when are you going to do it again? But Dan, some Democrats are saying that is not enough. They're saying, under international law, you can't just do that. What's your take on this? Did they have?
Well, I think it's the same thing as Venezuela, which is, and I'm not saying this to be snarky or partisan, they never really made the real legit case, right? Remember, it was drugs in Venezuela, but the real thing was a broader regional play to clean out the hemisphere, to try to get China and Russia, dislodged, and ultimately Cuba, right, as the big, which I think may be next, by the way. Here, look, I think the reality is Israel and the United States over the last 3.5 years, and a lot of that was Israel, to be fair, have so weakened Iran. And the Israeli intelligence in Iran is spectacular, combined with our military being just absolutely amazing, that the reality is Iran was so weakened. They are sitting ducks on a pond. The regime was. Now, whether they decided to go attack last Friday or, Saturday morning, to Sean's point, they had the Ayatollah above ground in a place they thought they could strike. But the reality is we're going in because this was the moment to get them. Like, they are generationally weak. And over the next 2 years, they might have rebuilt. And Trump decided, as Sean said, after Venezuela, we feel confident, and the Israelis felt confident. This was it. Go.
A lot of the big question on a lot of people's minds right now is sort of, what are we doing? What is the end game? And I think, we just heard from Hegseth, and I was taking notes on this because I think we are starting to see the administration sort of say, okay, this is what we're going through. He had 3 big things: destroy Iranian missiles and missile production, destroy their navy, no nuclear weapons. He said, this is not Iraq. This is not a nation building exercise. We just lost Sean. Hopefully he will jump back up. Guys, Sean is having internet issues this morning, of course. So we're starting to get an idea from the administration, Dan. But what does success look like for this administration? Can they do all those things, still pull out and not take down the regime completely? Is that a success?
Well, no, because this goes back to what we said last summer when they went in and did the initial strike. And it was kind of amazing to hear Hegseth sit there and be like, well, we obliterated the nuclear weapons last summer, but we had to then make sure that they don't come back. You don't rebuild a nuclear weapon within a couple months. The reality is we didn't obliterate it before. I don't know how you take out all of these things that they mentioned and leave the regime. I know that the previous heads are now gone, but if it's just the next, set of people rise up with the same ideology, the same core set of strategic objectives, look, there's no reason the Chinese can't ship ballistic missiles to them tomorrow. I mean, so I think what's amazing is the administration has said at times the regime's got to go, but they've kind of hedged now. And I thought it was remarkable to hear Hegseth say point blank, we are not into regime change, even though they've been talking about regime change and they want the people to rise up to do it.
Well, I mean, it would be impossible to do a full regime change, scenario here without boots on the ground, right?
I don't
How
know.
do you do that how do you do that with air defenses only?
Well, it's my understanding the CIA and the Mossad are actively on the ground, and they are, and it's not a small amount of CIA and Mossad on the ground. Now, it's not 100,000 troops. It's a country of 90 million people. But I think there is a presence on the ground trying to do this. But you're right. I mean, this is the big gap in everything, which is even if you accomplish what Pete Hegseth laid out,
right,
take out the missiles, the nuclear program, you then potentially have a power vacuum.
That's where I was going to go.
On the ground. And look, we all hope that what comes next is not equal to or worse than the current regime. And that's how do you ensure that doesn't happen? And I have to imagine the Israelis are not cool with that and are doing everything they can to prevent it.
Not only a power vacuum and, who comes next, but like oftentimes when you have a power vacuum, this becomes like a breeding ground for terrorism, right? Like all these other groups, they start fighting each other. They start coming after the United States, and we won't be there to sort of tamp any of that down because that's not what this mission is. But I want to go back to, you mentioned, the regime change not being the goal. The president said right after the bombings that he expects the people of Iran to rise up and take their own government. He says, your best opportunity is right now, do it. But they don't have the capacity to do something like that, do they? I mean, the reporting, I'm not an expert in the region, but the reporting indicates it's not as simple as just grabbing a gun and, walking into whatever palace and taking over.
Well, of course, because it's also just not only are they not necessarily equipped, and again, I think the CIA and the Mossad are on the ground trying to change that. But you're talking about a peoples who, for 50 years, if you popped your head up, it literally could get taken off. Mm-hmm. So they are gun shy. It's like if you move for the king and you miss, your family is likely dead. So you have to ensure on the ground that if they rise up, go back to Iraq in the first Gulf War, when George H.W. Bush in the U.S. encouraged people to rise up, and Saddam Hussein and his army slaughtered them. Now we're trying to say we're going to take out most of their weapons. Okay, maybe. But I think the people on the ground are going to need more than, R and Netanyahu saying this is your moment.
Sean is back with us here. Let me get you on this. So Dan and I were talking.
We're good.
Dan and I were talking when we lost you about Hegseth saying the administration's goal is it's not regime change, right? They're not doing that. They're trying to go for the missiles, destroy the Navy, make sure there's no nuclear weapons. But that means that the administration might be pulling back with part of the regime still intact. Are you comfortable with that scenario?
Well, I think it kind of looks like, what they're trying to do is make sure people, to the extent people are paying attention, they look at the Venezuela model and say, hey, look, if we can get somebody like Delcy Rodriguez in Venezuela, we're not necessarily, I think the point they're making is we're not concerned with who as much as are they on the team? Are they willing to ensure that whoever leads that country isn't trying to get a nuclear weapon? I have a hard time believing that you could leave anyone in the current regime in place. But I think I think what they're trying to do is make it clear that that's not our goal. Our goal is to prevent a nuclear weapon, and we'll take whoever we can get who will state that that's an agreeable outcome. So it's a little bit of a, that is not the ultimate goal. So I think they're just trying to make it clear. We're not in here solely for regime change. We're here with a greater strategic objective.
But I think this is why they don't want to talk to the media right now, because they're trying to see if they can
get. Just so we're clear, they're literally talking to the media right now.
Yeah, hold on. Pete Pete Hegseth, that did not take questions. Pete Hegseth
He's
came
taking
out.
questions right now, Dan.
All right.
Literally.
Well, all right. Well, now we're on the show, but I think so. I'm not watching this. I'm talking to you, but I think it's why Trump, as a rule, has not come out and held a press conference. He calls journalists with like a pinprick, here's 5 minutes and I'm out. I think it's fascinating. I mean, Sean, he didn't take questions on Air Force One. I don't know when the last time was he came back from Florida and did not talk. No, but hold on. I think the challenge is they do not have answers to these questions yet. So just like we're talking, I'm not trying to be snarky. I think they genuinely don't know. They're hoping the dominoes fall. And Iran says, that's it, timeout, we give up. But the longer it goes, at some point you have to go before the country and say, because Sean, what you just said and what Hegseth said leaves a giant void now, which is, okay, sir, if we're not trying to change the regime and you take out the missiles, you take out the weapons, and a power vacuum is on the ground, what if we get something worse? What if bin Laden, basically, the next bin Laden takes over, then a radical cleric?
Yeah, I mean, you do have to worry about an IGRC leader. But I think the point that I'm making that at least I took from what Hegseth was saying is our goal is not just to change the regime and that's it. Our goal is to do X. And if that becomes a byproduct of it, but I want to get back to a couple of things. One, let's remember when this went down. Basically, early in the morning, Saturday. This is Monday morning. We've got a press conference that started at 08, right? This is like everyone's like, oh my God, he talked to at least 6 reporters, if not 8, from my counting. I think they miscounted.
I think it's 10.
This might be 10. Yeah, I mean, I picked out a few that said that they had talked to him that wasn't in the list that some people put out. So he's talking to reporters. He did 2 long videos, and they have a press conference Monday morning. Like, let's go back. You had a former SecDef that went missing for 10 days, a president that didn't talk to the press.
Sean, but we're in war.
Okay, I'm just saying. Like, let's keep some stuff in context, which is this president has addressed the nation twice by video. There's the 2 leaders of the military, civilian in uniform, just spent 47 minutes addressing the media. Like, the president called 10 reporters in the last 36 hours. Like, let's not pretend that there's been a blackout here.
So, Sean, let me ask you, was that what you just described, what was the intent of all of that? So just, I have the Trump playbook for 5.5 years. This was not the Trump playbook. Why did they make a change from the traditional Trump posture?
I'm sorry, what is the traditional Trump posture?
He holds press conferences.
Right,
well, look, first of all, again, time out. As I'm saying, like, let's all pump the brakes. This happened in the wee hours of Saturday morning. It's
why did they
at
change?
8:47. Who knows? We may get an address to the nation tonight.
So you think it's all a coincidence?
Okay. No, I think it's message strategy. I mean, they went out and did this. I mean, look, I actually think this is from how you would want to roll this out. The problem is, and again, he talked to 10 reporters in 36 hours. They just held a 47-minute press conference.
He didn't hold it.
Huh?
He did not hold it. They did at the Pentagon, which has limited availability. We all know that right now.
I was going to say, is legacy media there right now, or are they just doing
they don't have a feed. I don't know who's there. I mean, I don't know.
You know who's there.
No, you don't, because Dan, hold on, Dan, time out. You didn't even know he was answering questions, so don't tell me you know who was there.
I turned it off, but they said who was in there before.
Time out. Hold on. You want to actually talk to someone who knows what's happening, or do you want to speculate?
Go ahead.
There's a big difference between a hard pass and a daily pass. They could have easily had a bunch of these folks get waved in for the press conference. I don't know. NBC is carrying it live. All the majors are carrying it live. So whether or not they have space in the Pentagon is completely separate than whether or not they got brought in for cover a press conference.
Okay, let's move on to perceptions of this. There's a spin campaign going on, both parties, I would say, actually. But first, I want to talk about just the general public, because we know for a fact that most Americans do not want to see additional war, right? They are sick of what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. They're fearful of nation building and, American boots on the ground. And the public polling shows it. Before this weekend, before these strikes began, only 21% of Americans said they support a strike on Iran. This was polling from the University of Maryland, I believe, in mid-February. Only 40% of Republicans said they would support that. And then there was a new Reuters poll that came out yesterday showing only one in four Americans approved the U.S. strike, while about half, including 1 of 4 Republicans, believe the president is too willing to use military force. Sean, is this a concern for you as a Republican, or do you think over time, just like the Venezuela strike became more popular, that this could be more popular?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think, first of all, context matters. Doing a flip poll before anyone's ever been briefed on like what's happened over a weekend is not scientific. So I'm not really concerned. What I will say is the following. It's like the economy. If we're having this conversation in 30 days, I'm very concerned for a variety of reasons, politically and personally, et cetera.
Do you mean this conversation about Iran in general?
Like where we are in Iran and what's going on and how many troops are. If on Friday we're talking about the fallout of the Texas election and the Ford or more specifically, the Ford is heading back, this way. I'm in a much better, different place. I mean, again, we did this with Midnight Hammer. We did it in Venezuela, very much a different operation, obviously. But going in surgically is a very different thing. You've heard JD Vance, even Hegseth just now, this is not Iraq. We're not here. They're very cognizant of that. Going in and making the world a safer place and coming out is going to be a very different situation than if in 7 days we're talking about much more, many more casualties, down planes, ships that have taken hits. There's a very big difference. Context is going to matter huge here. And so even at the end of the week, if we're having a very, a conversation about battle damage assessments, et cetera, we're going to be in a very different place than if on Wednesday Iran capitulates and we have, new leadership there. So part of this is time is going to tell.
Dan, the Ayatollah is dead. Most of the regime is gone. Okay, maybe not most of the regime. Dozens and dozens of top officials who terrorized the world, terrorized their own country. Do you think that this can become more popular, or a lot of Democrats think that this is just going to help them politically?
Well, the Democratic Party is all over the place right now. So, those are two separate questions. I think one thing that and this is just anecdotal, found stunning was just the number of people I know who are apolitical or even Trump supporters who are like, I don't like this. Now, to Sean's point, they're kind of hoping that this works. But go back to what's Trump's weakness right now, not just in Iran, but everywhere. Extreme and chaotic, right? Those are the frame that Minnesota, even the Venezuela thing, while it got more popular, people were like, whoa, I woke up to, we went into Venezuela. Now, to Sean's point, it was over within 4 hours, literally. And within 8 hours, he was in New York, or 12 hours, right? I do think there are a lot of people who are like, holy cow, we went. On Tuesday, he gave a State of the Union. I think it was 3.5 minutes on Iran. And on Wednesday, we were talking about whether people stood or not on immigration. And we are now talking about a regional war in the Middle East. So I think Sean is right. If this comes to if Iran capitulates, we get a new government that wants to work with us and there's peace, Trump's going to almost be on Mount Rushmore to some extent, right? That he pulled this off.
Yeah.
But I will say on the Democratic Party, look, some are unhinged because it's a zero-sum game to them. There are others who I think are trying to split the difference of like, Shapiro, I'm thinking about Gavin Newsom of like, well, you didn't get, the war powers resolution. And then there are others like Fetterman and even Mark Kelly at first, before he got pressure, who are like, hey, let me wait and see. So far, so good. And I think the party is completely split. Now, we're not the only party split, and that's the issue.
But
well, I will say our split, it is like this thin. It's Thomas Massey and Rand Paul.
Tucker.
And
again, I'm not sure that I would.
There are. We're going to get to the media, but go ahead.
I was going to say, I want to get to Republicans in a second, because I agree with you, Sean. It's some loud voices, but it's not a lot of voices.
And also, the one thing I think that's interesting about the Democratic Party is I get the tactical disagreement with Trump. I wouldn't have done it this way. But when you have member after member who had been on the record saying that Iran is an existential threat, Kamala Harris on the record saying, don't, that was her direct quote. And suddenly they now put out statements that, President Trump went way too far. It's like, wait a second. You can't be on the record saying that we need regime change in Iran, and suddenly President Trump shouldn't have done it. You look silly. So I think that there is one thing to have a policy discussion about the how it happened. But the idea that somehow you're out there saying like we shouldn't have done this. And I mean, like I said, I put this video out on my social media. There is some rank and file Dem this morning saying it's not a real danger. And I forgot the exact. I mean, like when you're trying to parse the dangers that we face and the threats that we face, you're not in a good place.
Well, I actually disagree about that, Sean. I think the American people are there, which is, look, I can name you 30 countries that are dangers to us. Imminent danger is a big difference. And this is where the administration's got to be careful. Just say the truth. We had them on their knees and we went for the kill.
But again, I think that danger is relative. I mean, this isn't like there's a difference between countries that pose a threat. Iran has killed Americans.
In Iraq.
Iran tried to kill a former president of ours. There is a big difference. They're not like, sitting in the corner yelling bad things at us. This is a country that poses an existential threat to us and to the region.
Well, as I said last week, there was no American walking down the street last week who said, I am worried tomorrow Iran's going to attack us.
I want to dig more into the Dem divide on this and what's going on the Republican side, but we gotta move on here because we're gonna see the first test in politics on this coming this week. There's a war powers resolution that is going to be geared up for the floor in both chambers. It is expected to fail. There are a number of Democrats, Greg Landsman, Josh Gottheimer, expected to oppose the war powers resolution, right? House Democratic leaders are encouraging the party to back it, saying they don't have enough evidence evidence to say the U.S. should go into Iran, and they plan to highlight what it's going to do to oil prices and that sort of thing. But Dan, this is politically risky for Democrats, right? I mean, you go back to the sort of contemplation they had around the first Iraq War. There are a lot of Democrats who didn't want to be against it because they didn't want to look weak and unpatriotic. That is a calculation that is going through their minds right now. Would you say?
Oh, absolutely. And my advice to don't play that game, because ultimately you have to believe what you are saying. And I think where politicians get caught is trying to ride the wind and hedge across the board and then kind of wait and see, right? And they say, oh, well, if you go back and look at my statements, I said, I have this qualifier or that qualifier, so I was on the right side of this. I do think that you saw it immediately when Gallego and AOC and Sanders came out. I was fascinated to see how long it took Shapiro and Newsom to come out. They were clearly trying to figure out how to speak to this, but there is a divide. And
Can I just say this? Look, I'll level set this in a bipartisan way. I'll throw you a bone here. There is risk for both parties, right? I mean, you alluded to the risk on our side, and I think Rachel just alluded to the risk on the Dem side. If you're a Republican right now, we have, and this president has been very clear, no forever wars. I have no belief in my mind. I mean, President Trump doesn't need a memo to tell him this. He understands what he was doing the other day. Like this is not like somebody said, hey, Mr. President, remember you campaigned on no forever wars. And Tucker's going to get pissed. He knows this. He's well aware of this. This guy doesn't need a memo or a PowerPoint presentation. He's well aware of this. The vice president the other day in that Washington Post story said it. But if we're wrong, we're screwed. I get that. He gets that. The vice president gets that. The secretary of war gets that. It's same thing with the economy. We put all of our chips in the big, beautiful bill and some of these policies, the investment and the tariff. I mean, if we're wrong, we're screwed. I think we're right. Right. Yeah. And this is the thing. But on the flip side, to Dan's party, if these guys go out and start rooting once like they did with Maduro, and it becomes a political benefit to us to say the world is a safer place because President Trump once again took out a threat to the United States, they're going to own that.
Yeah. Well, I think the issue in the party right now is there's a significant part of our base that looks at Trump and says, look, one of the lessons they've taken from him is never, ever, ever give an inch and applaud the other side. I mean, you saw it this weekend. If Kamala Harris had done this or Joe Biden had done this, would Donald Trump have come out and say, oh, it's wonderful, they got rid of the guys, great job showing? No, he would have said, he would have found the Achilles, or he would have just said, here's a reason it wasn't as successful or whatever. my view is that part of Trump is what a lot of people don't like, but they say part of his success in having a locked in base that never leaves his side is he never gives an inch. And they're telling parts of the party, you need to be like that.
I also think he's got a track record now, right? Between Midnight Hammer and Maduro, people are like, okay, this, we trust you now to not go in and make this a forever war. There's no boots on the ground. There wasn't a Midnight Hammer. There aren't in Venezuela. We trust you. So far, the president actually has a pretty good record of going in, completing the mission, and getting out.
This
Sean,
is a lot more complicated than Venezuela.
Hold on.
Everybody knows.
Can I ask you both something? If I were a Democrat, one of the things I would counsel you start saying, because this is a Republican talking point, Midnight Hammer was a huge success. No, it wasn't. Hello, that's why we're back there. I am stunned that Democrats are falling, instead of being unhinged on this other stuff, I'd be like, look, he went out over skis, said we obliterated everything. It was amazing. A, we didn't. B, he talks again like this in this, like, we're going to destroy you and take you off the face of the earth. This is where you trap him a little.
Well, and the one thing
they're talking about
look,
process issues, which is that he went around Congress, which doesn't resonate with the public.
Well, so there's 2 points in here. To Dan's point, like if I were we've kind of constructed this a little ourselves. I think the simple argument is this: last year we degraded their nuclear capabilities. We had an opportunity. They were going to reconstitute them. We always knew that. And frankly, that was actually part of it. The president said it's a matter of how, we think we've taken them out for months or years. I think we can easily say, look, the current leadership in Iran made it very clear that they were going to do as much as they could to reconstitute and to attack us sooner rather than later. We felt like we had the opportunity to take them out, and we did. So that's, I actually think that this works well. Like if they message this exactly that way. But I'll say this is another, and I know to some degree, getting into the nuances of any policy can be a very tricky thing messaging wise, but the war's power, that does not apply. There are no boots on the ground. It has not been 60 days. When members of Congress say that, there's such a level of cluelessness about understanding the basic law of what the War Powers Act actually says and requires of the executive.
You're not saying this is not a war, though, right?
It's not a war.
Really?
No, there are no boots. We haven't. We fired.
Doesn't mean boots on the ground does not. There are
no. You can conduct a war in the air. You can conduct a war at sea. But I'm just saying, there is the notification is X amount of time on the ground, this many days. He hasn't done that. They're briefing the gang.
Then maybe that needs to be updated because we just took out the Ayatollah Khomeini and a whole bunch of the.
Well, and we're saying we may be there for a month.
Not war. I don't know
right,
what
but remember but the law says, I think it's 60 days that he can operate without going and getting a use of military force. So
let's move on because I want to talk about DHS. With what happened in Austin over the weekend, right? There was this shooting, 2 people died. I think 14 people were killed. And this shooter apparently had, some sort of Iranian shirt on. He wasn't Iranian.
It said, love Allah or, something about Allah.
Yeah, okay. So clearly it could have been a motivation. It brings the focus back to the Homeland here. And DHS is shut down right now. Just a reminder, it's been, I don't even know how many weeks. Republicans are teeing up a vote to try to reopen DHS with the argument that we have to protect the Homeland. We have to make sure we're at our 100%. Dan, do you think Democrats will get on board with that? It is a very serious moment in our country's history, whether or not you support what's going on in Iran.
Yeah, I'm curious if some of these people break off now. I do think this is a little bit of a game changer. The one thing that may save them is there's talk in the Senate of trying to attach the SAVE Act, which would be, ridiculous. But I do think if they put a clean, DHS, just continuing resolution up, I could probably see 5 or 6 senators. So you'd be getting in the ballpark now, assuming Rand Paul maybe isn't there, that you'd have to pick off, a few more. But once that dam starts to break, even if you got 4, you would see the momentum, building. And I just think the average person says to themselves, hey, look, we're at war. Just fund this thing. I don't want to talk immigration right now, is what I think the average person would think.
I would think so.
Just look, I was the conference comms director. If I were back advising the House leadership right now, I would say grow up, stop playing, dancing around the way, like do it like message like they do. Democrats accuse the Republicans of undermining democracy, being Hitler and Nazis. If I were Republicans, I'd be on the House steps today saying America faced a threat over the weekend and the other party allowed it to happen. They need to start using guerrilla tactics and start messaging for real. Stop dancing around this whole thing and getting into funding mechanisms and blah, 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 and actually bringing the messaging fight to the American people. Republicans in the House need to step up their game.
Before we get to Captain Murphy, two other angles we should hit. One is how the world is reacting to this. The other is oil prices in the market. So oil prices, I'll just start there, jumped more than 10% Sunday night. This obviously shows the potential political risks that the president is taking with all these actions. I mean, affordability, huge thing back here for the midterms. Iran is launching retaliatory attacks on several oil tankers. There was reporting overnight that Saudi Arabia's largest oil refinery was at least partially shut down because of some sort of drone attack. Sean, the president has said that he's not worried about this. I think Jackie Heinrich was the one who asked him about it. And he's like, Jackie, I can't worry about that. Like that's, at what point though, does that become a worry?
Look, there's the right political answer, right? Which is, he has to say that. He can't go, yeah, I was thinking about oil prices when I wanted to defend the country. I mean,
the president's pretty honest, honestly.
Right. But
when he's asked questions
I'll
like
give
that.
you the same answer that I gave a minute ago, which is if we're talking about, if you know, I filled up my car this weekend, it was $2.69, right? If it gets to $3 a gallon, $3.15, depending on where you live, obviously, and it's a short-lived thing for 10 days. So they said right now, $10 spike in a barrel of oil is like 20 cents. I mean, like it's one thing for 10 days. It's another thing for maybe 2 weeks. But if I'll say what I said earlier, if we're having a conversation where, you know, oil, gas prices are hitting record highs in a month, I might have a very different answer than I have today, right? So there's a difference between the short term and the long term. And I think, you know, OPEC's increased production to deal with some issues that might go on at the Strait of Hormuz. So where we are in a week or 2 or 3, but remember, we're still months away from anyone having to really make a decision on the midterms. Again, where we are today versus where we are in 4 weeks, 8 weeks is going to be a big difference.
Yeah. I mean, like, even if they can isolate Iran from like the rest of the Middle East, say they can stop the regime from going after other Arab countries, like they can continue with their oil production.
By the way,
even if there's going to be chaos in Iran for a while.
Again, I don't want to work backwards, but that was a massive mistake by Iran to really start going after their Gulf neighbors and getting them on our side. This is where they might have actually had even keeping them neutral would have been smart.
That's a good segue for Dan here. What our allies are saying. I mean, like this is a huge action by the U.S. We didn't talk to our allies. You would think a lot of people would come out and say, "Oh, you know, this is terrible. We shouldn't be doing this." But because of what Iran is doing in terms of retaliating, we are seeing some support. I mean, it was like the UK giving the US permission to use British bases to strike. There are a number of European countries who have put out statements basically saying they support and are going to help the US with what's going on in Iran. Have you been surprised by that? Or do you think people are just waiting and don't want to criticize things right now while everything's up in the air?
No, I think they see the writing on the wall, which is they took out the Ayatollah, they took out the leadership, and they're like, this is kind of working.
This is good.
We want to get on the right side of history here and say that we're a part of it. I don't think it was just because they said the poor people of the UAE, you know, got hit. And I think, look, the Saudis were on board. It's now quite clear that they were encouraging that we do this. Look, I think the issue, I mean, OPEC can raise it all they want. The problem is if a third of the oil can't get out of port because they can't get through the straits, that's the challenge. And so I think Sean is right that I think the American people would give it a week or two. But if gas goes up to $4 or $5, you will see people angry. And I think the problem is even if it ultimately then works out, I go back to this. What do voters keep saying? It's chaos and extreme are the two words you keep hearing over and over again. I do think one of the remarkable things about our allies, to jump back to it, is the Europeans. I mean, just think about Europe in 2026. They're kind of hopeless a little bit with Ukraine. The whole thing about Greenland. Now you basically watch the U.S. pull this off to some extent. They didn't consult with you. They don't even really care what you think. Britain's now like, sure, you can use our bases. Well, we're on the other side of this a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean,
by the way, let's
it's
make sure
emasculating.
that doesn't get overlooked. I tweeted that over the weekend for all of these folks in Europe that love to tell us what to do with our military assets, what we should be doing in Ukraine, what we should be doing in NATO. When we asked, they didn't even ask, but preemptively, the British said, you're not allowed to use our air bases. And I know today they're now, but let's just remember, when the going gets tough, Britain's nowhere to be found. Just a reminder in the future, the next time they want to tell us what to do with our military.
I believe we have the captain here who has jumped onto the Zoom. But as he's getting set up, let's do a quick few thoughts on media coverage on all of this.
Yeah, can we just pull up real quick? I just want to show everyone how the New York Times framed the killing of a man that is responsible for, thousands and thousands of deaths. This is the headline from the New York Times. Ayatollah Ali Khomeini, hardline cleric who made Iran a regional power, is dead at 86. Now, there's a lot of memes comparing how they portrayed a guy like Scott Adams, the cartoonist from Dilbert, who apparently is, a controversial, they don't even use the word controversial killer. I mean, this is the New York Times. This is what state TV and state media in Iran would have said about the Ayatollah. So when you hear the New York Times and the Washington Post and NBC talk about press freedoms in America, remember how they portrayed a killer, a dictator that killed thousands of Americans, tens of thousands of humans worldwide. This is how the New York Times wanted to portray this man. It's disgusting. And I just am so tired of being lectured by the media about freedom when this is how they want to uphold a man that's done such despicable and heinous things throughout the world.
Let's bring in the captain. Captain Morgan
segue
here, former.
I'll take a glass of water.
There he is. Hey, thank you for joining us. Very much appreciate it. So the captain was on Sean's new
he's
show.
On mute, I think.
Morgan, you got to unmute yourself. First time.
While he's figuring that, just a word. He was on Sean's new show.
Right. Yeah, over the weekend.
It's perfect.
So we were. No. You're still. You got to hit the little button that has the microphone. It's. But Morgan was a Pentagon spokesman in the first Trump administration, and so we're trying to figure out if he knows how to use StreamYard. And so.
Oh, I think I hear something.
Yard is not my friend. How about that?
Hey,
there we go.
There we go.
We got you. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you. Glad I could get this mic working here.
We're happy to have you here. Okay, so let's just jump right in since we only have about 17 minutes left in the show. What does victory look like for the president in Iran?
Well, that's a really tough question. I think first and foremost, he said this very clearly. The president's been incredibly consistent. Iran will never get the bomb. And when the president says that, he means it. You go back and you think about what Kamala Harris said. She said, don't. Joe Biden said, never repeat a Kamala Harris talking point. He also said, don't. The Iran nuclear deal, what a mess that was, totally unverifiable. This president, though, has just said he's looked back at 7 presidents, certainly looked at 47 years of really failed policy or trying to ignore Iran, trying to pivot away from the Middle East. Sean and I are both veterans of Afghanistan. We were as much fighting Iran as we were the Taliban. And so this president said, no, it's going to end here. So I think what victory looks like is asserting U.S. dominance over Iran and restoring United States credibility in the region as it pertains to all of Iran's proxies there. They've totally, with Israel, and Israel has really done a heavy lift here since October 7th, defeated Iran's proxies, which has been enormously helpful to us.
So you guys, and Dan and Sean, jump in here. I'll just ask one more here. So right before we started the show, we heard from Secretary Hegseth, who said, the goal is no nukes, taking out missiles, taking out the Navy. this is not regime change and it's not going to be nation building. Is there any part of you that is worried or concerned about a potential power vacuum, or who could, rise to power if, and it looks like we will, withdraw from the region without a full extermination of the regime?
A power vacuum is always a concern, but that seems to be what the Achilles heel of the United States is. We worry about the power. We worried about the power vacuum in Afghanistan. It always frustrated me that people said, "Oh, well, Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires. We can't defeat Afghanistan." We fought Afghanistan like this with our little pinky finger. We could have gone in there and blasted the place into glass, put fatback on our feet and skated all over it. We could have completely destroyed Afghanistan. But out of the goodness of our hearts, we tried to build schools and roads and bridges and power plants and drag them out of the Paleolithic age, at least into the Stone Age. And when I was there, we were spending $2 billion a week in Afghanistan doing that. And most of the deaths that we incurred as a nation in both Iraq and Afghanistan was trying to rebuild those nations. So I think the Secretary of War is completely correct in saying, no, we're not here to build your nation. We're not here for regime change. We're here to stop this threat to the American people. And that's an America first approach. People confuse America first and they think it's isolationist, at least until I think Venezuela people accused America firsters of being isolationists. Now you don't hear that so much. It is not anti-intervention. It's not isolationism. It's just what are the strategic interests of the United States, and does this conflict further the interests of ordinary Americans? And I think it does.
Dan or Sean?
I'll just, first of all, just for the record, I never actually entered Afghanistan. I just want to make sure I don't let my record reflect Morgan's service over there. So I was elsewhere. I will just say this. So I want to get you two questions, one on the commercial and one on the military. Let me start with the military. When we talked about, Dan mentioned CIA and Mossad forces potentially being in there. If we're going for full-on regime change, the secretary's clear, the president's clear. I don't want this to be Iraq. Are we limiting our options by not doing that, by just trying to fight this from the air?
You dragging that to me, Sean. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, all these are going to you.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm happy to answer it. No,
air power is, if we're not doing regime, air power just has its limits. And here in Alabama, where I'm sitting now, was really the invention of the idea of precision bombing. It was invented here at Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama. And that idea has taken root in the U.S. military. The idea was we could fly over people's armies, we could fly over other nations' navies, and we could avoid this trench warfare and endless conflict, and we could hit a few targets. They estimated we could take out a city by hitting a ball bearing factory, a power plant, an aqueduct, and we could really change hearts and minds that way. And it just didn't work. It didn't work. It was strategic bombing, massive, overwhelming bombing, really on a civilian population that ended in major conflict like World War II. So I know that the president's advisors understand that. We're hitting them with precision bombing right now, but that rarely changes, trying to get the mullahs out of Iran would be trying to get the Methodists out of Mississippi. It's pretty hard to do with precision bombing.
All right. The second question, we talked about the economic impact here. Strait of Hormuz, 20% of all oil goes through there. You got a lot of Navy assets in that area. How much can they, those are two separate issues, I guess, protect and guide commercial ships, oil tankers that are going through there? Because obviously this will have a political effect.
Oh, hugely vulnerable. The Strait of Hormuz is very narrow, as you know, and you're right. 20 million barrels of oil go through the strait every day. So you close that sucker down for very long, and the world economy is going to feel it. And it is a choke point, which is why going after their Navy is so important. But far beyond the reach of their Navy is Iran's drone program. They have tens of thousands of drones, and that is an asymmetric threat that's really hard to defeat. I think the world's commercial shippers know that. We saw Mertz say, I think it was yesterday, basically told all commercial ships to shelter in place, stay put while this is going on. So I think that there's going to be real pressure on the president to open that up again, make sure that the sea lanes are open. The Navy is, the United States Navy is unmatched. I'm biased in that. No, you're biased too, Captain Spicer. But we're unmatched in keeping sea lanes open. And I think that's going to be a major priority for the Department of War.
Dan, do you have any questions for him?
No, I think he's answered a lot of them.
I've got one more.
Yeah, hit me, Rachel. I'm ready.
The American Homeland. How on alert do we need to be right now?
We need to be on alert. And I don't want to alarm Americans, but what I'm concerned about is we've had so many undocumented aliens into this country in the past 4 years, 5 years. I mean, Trump has shut it down here in the last 12 months, but there are a lot of people we just don't know. We've got a lot of fighting age males came into the country, and there have been reports, and I don't want to speculate on air, but there's certainly been attacks around the country, and we're vulnerable to that. The DHS right now is shut down, regrettably, and DHS was tasked, I believe it was scanning 4 or 6% of all container ships that came into the country to see what their contents are. We have no idea what's in a lot of these container ships. I mean, just as Ukraine did to Russia, if you remember the spiderweb attack where a truck driver drove into Russia and the back of his truck opened up and out flew a bunch of drones. Well, the same thing can happen in the thousands of container ships that are sent here. And Iran is one of the biggest manufacturers of drones in the world. So I'd say to Americans, be vigilant, be aware. It's not just our soldiers on the front line. When the president rolls the dice like this, and it's a significant risk. It's a significant risk to his presidency. There's some risk to the population as well.
Captain, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Glad I could figure out the mic.
Zoom is always a challenge. Let's take some questions. Okay. Bumps Johnson question: could the Iranian conflict and potential impact on gas benefit Canada in securing a good trade deal in order to offset prices with Canadian product?
100%.
Sure.
I mean, we saw this the last time. I'm just trying to think of one of the tariff things that with China and the rare earth minerals effect, right? That Carney basically reached out to Trump and said, hey, let's get a deal going on some of these rare earth minerals. These are the moments, if I were in other countries, that I had something to offer the U.S., especially an OPEC country or anything like that, I'd be working on a deal this is just deal making 101. Look at an opportunity like this to reach out and say, hey, we're your friend. We want to offer this. Let's make a deal right now. And this is literally his ethos, deal making. So great question. I think if I were Canada, I would look at this as an opportunity to do whatever you could on any of the industries.
Question is whether they see us as their friends still. I'm serious. And I think that because the other side of it is, if I see you as an enemy, I'll sit on my hands.
And Carney,
right? But actually, Dan, I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I think every one of these countries looks at every deal, hopefully in their own, saying, hey, sure, this is a good time to make a deal.
Yep.
Let's take another question. Okay. Question: how is Trump's decision to launch major strikes on Iran different from what he accused Obama of, using Iran and the threat of war as a political tool rather than pursuing real de-escalation?
I'm not sure what that's saying. I mean, Obama didn't, neither of them. I mean, Obama tried to strike a deal. He thought he could buy. I mean, look, to back up, I think in both instances, what they're talking about is delaying Iran getting the bomb. right? I think part of the problem is, I mean, just listening to our guest earlier is, on the one hand, you talk about U.S. dominance. On the other hand, it's like, well, air power can't take out the mullahs and the clerics, right? So the problem is Iran has nuclear research buried in mountains all over the country. We don't even know where half of them are. And so I think it's, do I think Iran's going to stop trying to get a bomb? I don't. You're just hoping maybe this stalls it for 20 years, not 4 years, and that's just the trade you make.
Yeah.
Which is why, by the way, I personally think Trump's not wrong. I mean, I know a lot of you have asked me this. I do think there is something that Iran is so weak. This was a historic opportunity. You just pray it works, because if it doesn't, it's a problemo.
Well, look, to what Dan said a second ago, the thing that's got to be understood is that, like, it is in their DNA to hate us. Sure. And so to think that, like, we're buying time every time we do something like this. The question is, are you buying 6 months? Are you buying 5 years, 10 years? Yeah. And I think that this is important, is, the further we can set them back, their capabilities. But one thing that Morgan said that's important to understand is that, like, you saw this guy this weekend. Obviously, it's all speculation at this point. I mean, he didn't hide it because he wore a sweatshirt. But the question is, what other threats do we face in the homeland that have been, sleeper cells sitting here? Hopefully, we take them out, or there are none. But I think that those are real concerns that we have as a country. So, look, I think the difference is, and I alluded to bin Laden. There were rumors, in the past, of the ability to take him out, and we chose not to. You have to, as president, take the opportunity sometimes to make decisions that aren't easy. And I think the president made the right one this time, which is taking out that threat.
Thanks, Miranda. Let's take another.
By the way, I also think it's not just the homeland. I'd be nervous about, like, the U.S. embassy in Greece or, Nigeria or somewhere like that, where they find the soft underbelly of some country. Remember that's what bin Laden did a lot.
It's interesting, Dan, that you brought that up, because post 9/11, one of the things that we did, not just domestically, but
harden them,
but overseas, was harden these buildings and put serious requirements on there. We moved our embassy in the UK, largely for this reason, that because of the perimeter access and the proximity to, like, streets and things, we said, hey, we can't guard that safely anymore. But they will, those are our soft targets, right? And that's why you saw the State Department and here in the United States, big targets suddenly have new, setback requirements, barricades requirements, etc., for those reasons.
Let's take another question. Okay, Peggy asks, what are the specific circumstances needed to enact the war powers? I see conflicting messaging saying last time it was used in the late 1940s, all the conflicts since then. Why now?
No, I believe
all the conflicts since then. Why now?
In Iraq, right? I mean, that was the whole thing of the war powers vote, that all those candidates got, in a pickle over, was they voted for authorization. I mean, look, some of it is symbolic. And of course, you always have the option, which they did in Vietnam. We never declared it, but ultimately they started trying to cut the money off. I mean, that's the power of the purse. I think Sean is largely right, which is, I think this will be defeated here this week. The question is 30 days, 45 days from now, if we're still in some capacity doing this, I think you'll see this vote could start getting very interesting.
You mentioned, like, several weeks from now. One thing we didn't talk about is how long is this going to last? I mean, what is your over and under right now, guys?
I think the problem with answering that, Rachel, is Trump will declare victory. I think in 3 weeks, if we're still there and the regime is not given up, Trump will find a way to declare victory. He'll say the ballistic missiles and the nuclear program have been set back, and we obliterated them right now. And there are people, I just can't see him because of this regime question. And I think, most people would probably say, great, victory, kind of move on. But that would be messy.
Yeah. Sean, what do you think?
Yeah. So again, there's two things. The War Powers Act deals with two things. One, notification, which is to notify Congress in 48 hours. President did that. There's a briefing of the gang at 8 today right? So again, remember, things went off Saturday. Here we are Monday, press conference this morning. One, two, the notifications happened over the weekend, and there's briefings today that continue. Staff and members, or staff was briefed yesterday. Members were out of town. And then the other thing is duration. So forces can't be on the ground for 60 days without Congress extending that. There's a 30-day short-term extension, but the president hasn't put forces on the ground. So it's sort of, that's why I was saying before, it's a null and void point right now. The bigger issue in Iraq was they had an authorized use of military force. And so the Congress can proactively give the president use of military force. That's what sort of what members regretted, both in, sort of going forward, was when they gave it to them in Iraq, there was a belief in the executive that gave them, they phrased it very vaguely to say, terrorism. And so what happened was the executive used that going forward to say, okay, we're using the existing use of military force authorization to do a lot. And I think what happened was a lot of members of Congress said, well, that's not entirely what we intended. And remember, Congress has changed. So you get new members to come in and say, I want to revote on that because I wasn't here. But this is where the stickiness comes in, which is Congress gave him the right to fight terrorism and a window and an open-ended, right? So that's the rub that you have right now, or continued to have had the last couple decades, is that the executive has said, well, you gave us this authority to go root out terrorism. So there is an additional use of force that, I wouldn't be surprised if the Trump administration claims that that's still in effect.
All right, guys, we are at time, but obviously this is going to be the story that dominates the next few weeks. Just a note here, we shall pray for our troops, pray that they stay safe, and pray that everything is executed quickly, and that the administration is successful here. I mean, both parties should be saying that right now. Sean, you got a show coming up today? What's going on with you?
You're on mute, Sean. He's so excited, he almost started screaming.
I know. Sorry. 2 cups of coffee is my max. Obviously, we're going to continue this conversation. My former colleague in the White House, Victoria Coates, she was the deputy national security advisor. She'll join us. And then former undersecretary of the Department of Defense and secretary of the VA, Robert Wilkie, will join us. So we're going to go break this down from all aspects today.
Great. And if you subscribe to my newsletter later today, you're going to get a blast about the political landmines here, but also the political opportunities. I mean, if the president pulls this off, it would be huge. Absolutely huge. That's a big if, though. So,
well, just remember, historically, presidents don't get the big bump when they do. They do, but then within 6 or 9 months,
there's also a big difference. This is like, I don't think even if it's a resounding success, I don't know that people, to Dan's point, vote on foreign policy success.
They never vote on foreign policy issues, but still it would be a huge accomplishment.
Oh, yeah, sure. For the history books. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, guys, we will see you back tomorrow at 8:30. Thanks for joining.